Howdy, friends, and welcome to the StoryField. This is a podcast where we talk about business, faith, and life in general.
Okay, so here's the deal. We want you to be encouraged. We want you living in hope. This life we live is complex. It's hard at times. At the StoryField, you will find great stories of normal people just like us who will inspire you. Our goal is that you leave encouraged, inspired, and excited to move forward in life. But before we get started, one thing though, if you're listening and you find yourself really hopeless right now, send us an email at hope@thestoryfield.com so we can pray for you. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get started.
So, hey, Storyfield, I want you to welcome Joel Penton. Did I say your name right, Joel? Your last name?
You got it. You got it.
Okay, we're texting and you're Ohio, so, I don't want to mess it up. Hey, welcome to the show. There's some really cool things about you and your story I do want to cover, but I think to start this episode a little bit different, I really want to just dive right to the meat of what my heart is and why you're here. So, is that cool? We can get
That's
to your
gonna be
story
great.
as we discover it. Cool. So, you discovered a way, or maybe located a way, or determined a way to offer Bible education to public school kids during school hours. And you wrote a book about it. We'll get to that. You've got to talk about that. This is during
Right.
school hours, Bible education. So right when I first saw this, it was just like, wait, what? So
Right.
get into this and then we'll start unfolding your story in the process.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity. That's right. Bible education, public school students during school hours. People hear that and they think it sounds crazy. It's very real. I learned about the possibility in 2018. It's when it kind of crashed into my life. But the practice is, the legal term is released time religious instruction. Little did I know until 2018 that the Supreme Court ruled decades ago. In fact, it was in 1952. They ruled that public school students can be released from public school during school hours to receive religious instruction. Doesn't have to be a Christian, although our program certainly is. But they can receive religious instruction during the school day. But it has to meet three criteria. It has to be off school property, privately funded, and students need parental permission. Sadly, this ruling and this opportunity has just been under the radar, underutilized. It's practiced here and there in small pockets. However, our experience is that 95% of people have never even heard this is possible. And so we learned about it because a program in my hometown, people in my hometown started a release time program, saw incredible impact. They had 95% of the entire school enroll in the program. And
Wow. Yeah.
and they reached out to me to tell me about it. I now live in Columbus. I don't live where I grew up. They told me about it, and they enlisted my help to answer the question, why don't more people know about this? How could something like this grow? And it was amidst that conversation that our ministry, LifeWise Academy, was founded.
That's wonderful, man. Was the Lord teeing you up for this? I mean, kind of looking back, and we want to run this like as a story too, but like, was he teeing you up for that moment?
I do think so. I didn't realize it so much at the time. I should have realized it, but looking back, the experiences and relationships that he had kind of put me in over the prior couple decades, really all coalesced to create this kind of perfect storm for this idea to come together and then kind of take off.
Yeah. So LifeWise formed in 2019.
Correct. That's when we launched our first two schools.
Okay. Tell us now, fast forward to, I mean, this is a short time period. I mean, how many kids are getting impacted? How many LifeWise Academies do you have around? Give us the now picture.
Yeah, well, it is short, particularly with a pandemic in the middle
Oh,
of that, right?
you
Because
started right on the edge, right on the beginning
right.
of it.
So in some ways, it's like we didn't start till 2021. No, that's not right. I mean, we did start in 2019, but there's a
Everything
pandemic.
shut down. Yeah.
Yeah, the schools are literally shut down. Yeah, today, well, confirmed for this fall, we will be in 530 schools across 24 states as of right now, but that number changes almost on a daily basis. That number's been growing.
Okay. Well, there's some whole business organization stuff. I want to talk to you about that because that's a big deal. But first, okay, let's back up. I want to run this because I want people to get a little bit of your backstory. Because I mean, we want to hear your story. Where did you grow up? Tell us about your childhood. Were you raised in church? Like, let's just get into it.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Well, so I am from small town Northwest Ohio, a little
Okay.
town called Van Wert, Ohio. I grew up like most kids, most of my friends, I had the typical small town life of school. Sports was a
Mm,
big part of my life. The big three of when I was real young of football, basketball, baseball.
mm,
Um, and that's really what my life was about. I attended church with my family.
mm.
We did every Sunday, and we did so quite religiously, literally, religiously.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that didn't in any way really define my life. And surely I heard the gospel growing up. I'm sure I heard it 1,000 times. We
Mm,
took communion. They talked about
mm,
Jesus, but I did not understand what Christianity, what the Bible was about. Like I thought it was about being a good person,
mm.
morals, and I had a vague hope that when I died, I was good, would be good enough to go to heaven or something.
Yeah, yeah,
I
oh
didn't.
yeah.
It was just the nominal Christian
Mm,
life until I was a freshman in high school, and I started attending a Bible study, and our church had a new youth pastor that you could tell there was just something a bit different about him, and he was really keen on the gospel. And at this Bible study, it was pretty simple. I went because my parents made me go. It wasn't
yeah.
really by my choice. But we would open the Bible, read a bit, talk about it, and would frequently talk about in the context of that, the gospel message. I'd never been a part of something like that, which seems so basic and sad to say I'd never been a part of something like
Yeah.
that. And in the midst in that context, my life changed. I mean,
Wow.
it was called from death to life, born again. My life changed. Jesus became real to me. I tell people, it's like the Wizard of Oz experience of Dorothy walking out of, black and white and into color in the land of
Oh
Oz.
yeah.
That's what conversion was like for me. And quickly because of that, and because I understood the connection between hearing the gospel and being born again, it became very
Mm.
important to me to make my life about sharing the gospel with others.
Oh wow. So freshman, 14, did that change your whole high school experience after that?
It did. I wish I could say that I immediately radically changed every aspect of my life. And certainly several aspects were immediately radically changed, but the lordship of Christ certainly he had to work his way into the various,
Oh yeah.
dusty rooms and attic of, my life. And so, but that in large part worked its way out in high school. And so
Okay.
it certainly had ramifications in my extracurricular activities,
Yeah,
in my
for sure.
friend group, in all of that. And so that came with its own challenges and
Man,
but it was great.
I love that part of the story and how important the word was and studying the word, then knowing what you're doing now, which is
Mm.
just really sweet of the Lord. Um, did you have brothers, sisters? I mean, what was your home life like? All that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm incredibly grateful for my home. Nobody could have more loving and supportive parents who really struck an incredible balance between with very high expectations they placed on us, their children, and also a pretty high degree of freedom, and trust. They're like, figure it out, but we expect that you're going to have straight A's and you're going to,
Yeah.
just kind of that.
Yeah.
And to grow up in that culture where that's your identity, your identity is, as a family, there's a lot of love and a lot of fun, but very high standards. We are, that's who we are. And I have three older sisters. That's why I'm
Okay.
so, in touch with my feminine side, as you can tell.
Oh
Um,
man. No, you're a good rounded man.
So, I certainly know a lot of the words to various show tunes, having,
Yeah,
been in the
yeah.
car growing up with my sisters listening to, whether it's Cats or whatever. Um, yeah, and I'm just, yeah, I'm great. I had great mom and dad. And they put us in the context where we would hear the gospel, right?
Yeah.
And um, so I'm grateful.
Yeah. Man, that's good. And speaking of, so Joel, you have five kiddos. I
That's
read.
right.
I actually do as well.
Oh,
And
wow.
I came from brothers. I was the middle of two brothers, and we have two of the oldest kids of ours are girls. So one of them's into, I mean, all the musicals and all that. So I didn't learn any of that until we had her. So I'm with you on that. Now I know Oklahoma, all these West Side
Oh, yeah.
stories. I know all the good ones now. I'm with you.
That's great. Yeah, me too, brother.
Um,
Um, yeah,
what's
we
your
have,
kid? What's your boy girl breakdown?
yeah, we've got four boys and a girl.
Okay, good for you.
Um, yeah, we went three boys in a row. I wish the girl were my oldest because she's the fourth and she's already more responsible and more helpful than the other four
I
combined,
tell
right?
everybody, it was so helpful to have the girls on top because we went girl, girl, boy, boy, girl, so they can run the household. It's amazing.
Yeah, they really can. She's much sharper than me in a variety of ways. I mean, if I run an errand, like I went to the pharmacy recently and I didn't know what I was doing because my
Yeah,
wife usually does that.
yeah, yeah.
But my daughter has observed my wife enough that she knew all that stuff. My boys, they would have been in the presence of that activity prior, but they're not observant to
No,
know have any clue.
no, we love our boys, but they're yeah, the girls can run stuff. Okay, so really cool football history. So you graduate high school. Were you recruited by Ohio State Buckeyes? I mean, that's a big, big, big football school. So I
Yeah.
want to talk about that as part of your story. Were you recruited? Like, tell me how kind of the football experience went.
I was, yeah, to back it up a little, I love sports and I tried out for football when I was 9 years old in Van Wert. And I was very unathletic as a kid. I was always fairly tall, one of the bigger,
Mm,
taller kids, pretty thin, but tall. Um, my friends are all in sports, but I was very uncoordinated, very slow. So I was picked third from last when I tried out for football.
oh,
Um,
wow.
but I tended to be a pretty hard worker. My father really encouraged me in that way.
Mm,
And so I had a certain amount of success, younger as a guy that was pretty unathletic but would work hard. And so if you work hard and pay attention, you can succeed at,
yeah.
at the local level. But then in high school, particularly my latter years, my sophomore and junior year, things came together athletically for me pretty well. I think I stopped growing so rapidly, and so
Oh,
coordination came together, strength came together, speed came together, and so I was recruited after my junior year. Had a good year,
wow.
and among the scholarship offers, yeah, Ohio State, Jim Tressel, who at that time was the kind of new Ohio State head coach, came through and offered me a scholarship.
Wow, that is special. So what years were you playing under him? You played 5 years, correct?
Yeah, which means I redshirted one year. So I
Okay.
was there '02 to '06. So my
Okay.
freshman year, the year I was redshirted and
Mm,
standing and watching on the sidelines,
yeah, yeah.
we did win a national championship. So I have a national championship ring, though I was
Yeah.
redshirted, so I didn't get to
Well, that
participate
was
in
your
the game.
freshman year to start your career.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
get to experience that.
It was pretty wild. And then I was blessed to be a part of in total three Big Ten championships while we were there. And then we went back to the national championship my senior year. We finished the regular season undefeated, won the Big Ten. But then we did fall to Florida in the national championship game,
Really.
sadly, as my last game as a Buckeye.
I'm sorry, man. What's it like playing in that stadium? I mean, give us some non-athletic people, non like that's just a whole kind of different world. Like the college athletic route, especially something that big. Give me some
Yeah,
thoughts on it.
it's pretty intense. It's pretty exciting. It's hard to describe. Um, because I'm from a town of 10,000 people and over 100,000 people attend live in person the Ohio State football games in the stadium. And so it's interesting to look up and realize there's 10 times your entire hometown, in live in the stands, not to mention the millions
Oh
watching at
my
home.
gosh. Yeah.
And so it's nerve-wracking, to a degree. It's exciting, but it's amazing how humans, how quickly we can grow accustomed to something and realize, oh, this is just like anything else. I always tell
Yeah.
people I always compare it to the Christmas gift. That a kid, you have that one particular gift you really want and you think it'll solve all your life's problems, and you
Yeah.
open it on Christmas morning and it's the most amazing thing, but it's amazing how within days and maybe even hours it loses its luster. And not that it ever became boring or something to play,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Oh yeah, for sure.
you just pretty quickly get used to it and you're
You
like,
lose
okay,
your
yeah,
awe factor. You like the awe factor, you lose it. Yeah.
that's exactly right.
Yeah. That's pretty neat. And Jim was it cool to be coached by him? Was it, I
Oh
mean,
yeah. I I'm biased, but I
mm,
consider him to be the greatest college football coach of
yeah.
all time. In terms of the way he combined um, unparalleled attention to detail and standards of excellence with the highest level of focus on character development and academic success. And I mean, he genuinely approached his job as head coach that he was there to grow young men into men who are gonna,
Yeah.
serve the world.
Wow.
And he was genuine about that. It wasn't just a shtick, that's
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. That's special, man. What a cool part of your life. Well, and one thing I did want to mention is you were nominated the one college football player each year for outstanding community service, the Humanitarian Heisman Award. That's a big deal. Like, to just talk about that for those who may not know what that is. How do you even qualify for it? What were you doing to even get nominated for that? Because you were in college playing football. I don't know how much other spare time you had on the side. I mean,
Yeah,
so
not a lot, which is maybe the I'm sorry, the bar is pretty low, since nobody has any time. So to win the award,
yeah,
yeah, it's called the Warfel Trophy, named after Danny Warfel, who was a Heisman winning quarterback for Florida, which ironically is the team we lost to the year
yeah,
I won that award. And this was I got it my senior year. I received the award, and it happened to be in a season for our team that we were preseason ranked number one in the country. We were undefeated. We beat nearly every team by a margin of more than 21 points. So we were really dominant that season. And so the national awards really were being handed out left and right, So our quarterback, Troy Smith, that year won the Heisman Trophy.
hmm
We had the best linebacker and we had the best this and that. And now I was not a marquee player by any stretch of the imagination. So I was very surprised when I was notified that my coaches had nominated me for one of these awards. It wasn't
yeah,
a position, but it was for community service. I thought, oh, that's
yeah,
great. And I think that's because I was so engaged in ministry
hmm
on campus. I was
hmm
involved in Campus Crusade, Athletes in Action. I would do a lot of speaking in the community. I went on mission
hmm
trips in the summers. And I just continued to be surprised when I was told, okay, now I'm a semifinalist and now I'm a finalist. And then I get a call from Danny Warfel himself to tell me I won. It was pretty wild.
Oh, that's awesome, man. So, I mean, even from your freshman year, the experience where the Lord really transformed you, you're a new creation at that point. I mean, it really worked its way out even in college. I mean, you were actively involved in faith-based organizations and churches and ministries and all that then, huh?
Hey, y'all. I just want to make an observation. When I see someone going through a legal situation, it seems like there are way too many unknowns. Well, the Allen firm provides legal guidance so that you can make a great decision, come to a resolution, and be at peace. For more information about the Allen firm, visit allenlawfirm.com.
Yeah, and I think it's the way God wired me
Mhm.
that it just I've always just felt compelled.
Mhm.
Um, I'm a fairly focused person, and so I came to faith, and it became like came to the understanding that, oh, the gospel is the most important thing in the whole world. It is the thing that transforms hearts and minds. We pretty much have the assignment to get this gospel into the hearts and minds of everyone in the world. So that's what I'm going to do. Like, what else is there to
Yeah.
do? Everything else seems fairly boring.
Yeah.
Am I gonna go try to make a bunch of money or something? Like, that's
Yeah.
boring compared to the eternal gospel. So that just, again, I don't feel like I certainly can't get any credit. Because it just, I don't know, like, that's just
That's just who
the way
you
God
are.
wired me. Yeah.
That's awesome, Joel. Okay. Let's keep moving on. You graduate, and then you started two different things, but I want you to explain that. Tell us the next step. Graduated, what'd you do?
Well, if I can take a very half step back, before I
Sure.
graduated, I got married. So I met my
Okay.
wife.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a big step. Yeah.
that's a big one. That's a big one. We better hit that one. Yeah, Bethany and I met through the Athletes in Action Ministry at Ohio State, and we got married. We were still both in school. I got married. I still had 2 years left. She was a little older than me, had another, just like a quarter semester left. Um, so yeah, and then eventually I did graduate, and I actually joined staff with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes for a year, but
Ah.
I met with the FCA director in Central Ohio, and he said, "Hey, you're clearly involved in ministry. Do you want to join staff with FCA?" And I said, "Well, what I'd like to do is keep speaking and maybe make a career of this, traveling and speaking and evangelism. I have this kind of platform as a football player, and I love sharing the gospel. And so I first joined staff with FCA as a speaker, but then pretty quickly I became very focused on doing school assemblies, followed by evening outreaches. And it wasn't exactly the typical FCA model. So we went ahead and started our own 501c3. Stand for Truth was the ministry.
Okay.
And then after a few years, that we had more opportunities than we could get to. So we formed a speakers bureau, started another 501c3 and in Relevant Speakers Network, and brought on other speakers and musicians to do the same strategy of going in school, doing school assemblies and outreach events.
Were you doing high schoolers, middle schoolers, just kind of all the above, or?
Primarily high school and middle school, the rare occasional elementary school, but mainly
Okay.
teens.
Okay. And this whole time you were making relationships with, even all the schools too. So,
Yeah, and that's where
uh,
in God's providence, you see the threads coming together, as you think of, relationships with schools,
mhm,
but more than just relationships with schools, learning how to speak the language of schools, because we, you know, engaged with, in fact, contracted with thousands of schools across the
mhm,
country to provide them something they want and need, which is character
mhm,
instruction, character
mhm,
development through school assemblies, which they do on a regular basis.
mhm,
Um, and then engage with students during those assemblies. It's
mhm.
interesting. Um, Not to think of it so much as sales, but you contract with the school, so you have to
Mhm.
speak that language, but then you present to the students,
Yeah.
and so
Two different audiences.
oh,
Yeah.
two incredibly different
Yeah.
audiences. And all the while, us having this ministry aspect where we would come back in the evening and we would partner with local churches. So we would contract with a
Uh,
school, present to students, partner with multiple churches in the area. So now, three times the number of schools we're working with those churches, and kind of speaking, having to communicate with all of them in ways that are intelligible and engaging. And those types of elements are what were this amazing providential, like, juxtaposition, intertwining, that kind of opened the door for this new project.
yeah. Okay. Well, before we get into that, because I want to hit that next, um, did you enjoy that, or did it get tiring after a while? And then what are some of the big things you learned just from because I know you had to learn a lot, but that's also running pretty hard. I don't know if you were starting to have kids by then, you
Yeah, it
know?
was running hard. I did enjoy it. By the end, it wasn't as though I didn't enjoy it, but I realized that I had two passions, but in fact, and I'll share them with you, but the second I realized was an even greater passion, and maybe even talent, or just bent.
Mm,
than the first being sharing the gospel on
Mm,
stage, being that guy
mm,
speaking, delivering the speech. That's a great passion, and I loved it, and I never really got tired of that. But what I hadn't been so aware of is that the Lord also wired me really as an entrepreneur and thinking
hmm
about things as systems and scale and how do we make things efficient. And those are all things that just came naturally to me that I
mm,
always thought in those terms. I
mm,
assumed other people thought in those terms too.
hmm
Um, but then as we started to grow as a ministry, realized that, oh no, I actually think about those things more than other people
Yeah.
do, and other people don't think, on scale um, and so that lent itself to scaling that speakers grow, and then also, of course, to starting this new project.
Okay, man, that's great. Okay, so then at some point it was time to launch LifeWise. So how did it go from, the bureau and all that was going on to, the conversation went about the off school stuff into this nonprofit LifeWise Academy? And then I do
Yeah,
want to talk about scale. I like business stuff too and operations and all that stuff too. So
great.
that's really neat.
Yeah, I'll nerd out with you all day long on
Oh, it's
that
so
stuff,
fun. I know.
well beyond the normal person would want to hear. Yeah, it again in God's providence. I mean, there's just so many threads. This program started in my hometown in 2012, and I didn't know anything about it. I think I had heard just here and there about this thing. It was called Cross Over the Hill, and that's because they bought a house next to the elementary school. There's a hill between the two,
Okay.
and they renovate to classrooms, and kids would be released. People would walk them over the hill to do these Bible classes. That started in 2012. I didn't know anything about it. I'm just doing, I don't live there, but I do have some
Yeah.
family there. In fact, and this is embarrassing to admit, I admit this, and I put this in the book, but my sister was on the board of this
Oh,
organization.
yeah.
So surely she told me about it, but I didn't really get it. And that's in fact I now realize why I wouldn't have got it. Well, like we explained it to people, and it takes a while for people to understand because it's such a foreign concept. Because people
Yeah.
think, no way, it's Bible during
Yeah.
school, that doesn't happen. Um, but in any case, they were doing this thing, had great success. 2018, I run into a guy at the Van Wert County Fair, a guy named Tim. Tim said, "Hey, I'm so glad I ran into you. Your name came up recently. We've begun to ask the question, how can we have this amazing program and other communities don't have it? You'd think every community would do something like this. It's impacting 95% of our kids. It's legal. You know, you think everybody would have this. And I tell people when Tim asked me that question, it's the day I gave up sleeping
Oh,
because,
yeah. Your wheels just started going off the
oh
charts.
yeah,
Yeah.
because as I dug in, and at first it was kind of like a, no way situation. Like, is this real? Like, what? 95% of the kids, and not only that, but I had a ministry that exists to reach kids in public schools. And here in my hometown, they were using this strategy that is reaching essentially everybody. And so very quickly, like almost instantaneously, like I just had this vision of, well, somebody, and I use the term McDonald's, like I actually was asking the question, has anybody McDonald's this
Yeah.
concept? Like it's hard, it looks like it's hard to pull off because you have to find a facility, you have to find curriculum, staffing, technology. Like there's a lot to do.
Mm.
Like, has anybody put it in a box so it's not so hard so that communities can hit the ground running so they don't need to reinvent the wheel? That was my question. And I did some research and found like, no, nobody's done this. And so I went back to the board of that group as they had asked me to kind of help answer that question. I went back to the board and I said, all right, here's the deal. I think that first you need to make this organization scalable, which means essentially replacing everything. You need to replace your curriculum, your statement of faith, like for some nuanced,
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah.
You need it's homegrown, it's great, but it's not
Yeah.
something that's going to be repeatable. So change everything, including your name, because that's even tied locally. Um, and then you can start to scale. And they basically said, we don't want to do that, but we think you should do that.
Oh my goodness. Did you have to sleep on that, or were you already at that point? You were already like, I'm in. And was Bethany in as well? Like,
Yeah, I was already in. I think Bethany was in. I think she was excited. Although there was certainly an element in the early weeks and months where I was the crazy person who has this vision that nobody quite gets, and just sounds well. And I'm a future oriented person, so I have a lot of ideas, and so
yeah,
my wife
you're visionary. You're a
and
Enneagram. Have you done Enneagram stuff? Are you a visionary on the Enneagram as well?
I haven't done Enneagram, but I have, but I've done a few of them. And one, the predictive index is one that
hmm
I've done. And mine came back with like a warning disclaimer, like this person is an extreme person.
Visionary. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's future oriented. So, and my wife would say that. My wife would
Mm,
say that I can't even live in like, I don't
yeah.
even know what's happening in the present because my mind
Yeah.
is in this future
Yeah.
world.
W-
But
We
for that
need,
reason, I was
I
just gonna
say
say,
we need people like you. So yeah, keep going.
well, I was gonna say that because of that I am always having ideas, and she hears ideas, and but as things came together, it started to become more real. And I mentioned him, Tim Stoller is the name of the gentleman in
Mhm.
Van Wert who's on the board there. And he likewise, perhaps even to a greater degree, is a vision-oriented, future-oriented person. And so he and I started almost daily, like 5 a.m. phone conversations about what this would look like. And so he and I were like committed, this is
Mhm.
happening. And we uh almost wishfully thought that everybody on the board and everybody in,
Mhm.
Van Wert, that they would be on board, and they'd be like, yeah, let's do this and we'll do it together and I'll help.
Mhm.
And so we were both a little surprised when the board was like, that's a great idea. Go ahead and give that a shot. We'll see if it works, but you just go do it. And so, yeah, it was not a hard decision at that point.
Wow. So did you? Okay, man, a lot of questions on that. From that's 2019 to now with 530 schools. Okay. Um, what's the next step, or what was some of the bigger things? I guess just to keep in with time we have. What are some of the bigger things you did in order that you saw the most success in scaling it? But I guess we should first ask Joel, like, how does it actually work? So how does LifeWise Academy work? And then,
Yeah.
how does somebody get it going? So I want to talk about all that as we kind of wrap our time up or start heading that direction. But
Yeah.
then put some flags on the marks on like, man, this was a big deal that really saw a lot of results. This is a big deal for our organization people listening. Unstuck Coaches hates it when movement and progress in a person's life or business is stuck or frozen or slowed or just stopped altogether. Well, we have found a solution. Unstuckcoaches.com. They offer a variety of coaching services to get you or your business moving again. Check out unstuckcoaches.com.
I'll try to tell it in story form and hit the how it works,
Okay, perfect.
perhaps through it, and then you can ask maybe some clarifying questions.
Okay, sounds
Um,
great.
we kind of take the nail it then scale it approach, and so
Okay.
we understood we need to identify some test kitchens, guinea pigs, low
Mhm.
hanging fruit. So identify two communities in Ohio back in 2019 that would work with us, knowing that we've never done this. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, I've never flown a plane before, but I'm going to
Mhm.
fly this one. Will you jump on
Yeah.
board? And so we found a couple and just figured it out as we went. I mean, every single thing we uh, had to deal with was the first time, and just tried to do everything with incredible level of excellence. So we raised money, and again, try to do things with excellence with in mind the solution we developed for this problem, and we encountered 10,000 problems throughout. The solution we develop needs to be repeatable. So understanding this is the test kitchen, let's solve all the problems and develop solutions that are not going to be custom per se, that can be repeated. That went well. Then we weathered the storm of 2020, and actually grew into a few schools. And in hindsight, that was the grace of God. When God does that, when something happens, God's doing a million different things all at the same time. And the Lord used COVID in a million different ways. And one of the ways he used it was it gave us enough time when everybody was shut down for us to kind of take a step back and really dissect what happened in 2019, to really figure some things out, to think on different levels. And so when the world slowed down, we didn't slow down. Like, we were figuring things out, and grew a little bit in 2020. And so then we said, let's set a goal to serve 25 schools by 2025. That was our goal, 25 by 25. Now, you know the end of the story.
Oh, wow.
Sounds ridiculous. But communities started voicing interest so rapidly that the writing became clear on the wall by spring of 2021. Oh my, we're going to be launching over 20 schools at once. And that was the moment where we realized we cannot do things one-to-one anymore. It's not going to be possible. I can't pick up the phone and call our program director in these different places every time. We have to batch things. And so that's when we started doing, group trainings and different things to batch that group through. And then it just, so at that point we realized, well, we went from 8 schools served to 36 in 2021. We redrew our goals, said, all right, on this trajectory, we might serve 1,000 schools by 2026. So that became our new 5-year goal. We always set 5-year goals. And to chart out that growth, we need to go from 36 to 84, from 84 to 200, from 200. So the goal of this past year was 200 based on that trajectory. The goal for next year would be 425. And we went, instead of 84, 200, 425, we went 133, 331, and we're confirmed in 530. That'll grow probably over 600 by the school year. So at each stage, I tell people, every year it feels like I had an entirely new job. Like, I have to learn a completely different skill set to lead an organization at this stage. The key, and everyone will say this, so, is having the right people. And that's the most clear evidence to me of God's providential and miraculous hand, is sending the right people at the right time. Our COO was the director of operations for a Fortune 50 company.
Oh, okay.
Our creative director, who built this studio and our videos you see online, he was an Emmy-winning filmmaker.
Oh my gosh.
And then, one of our VPs was is a Naval Academy grad who was an oceanographer and for the Navy. It's just like
you have the A team around you in a major way.
Absolutely. So I have a fun job of getting to lean on them. What I didn't answer necessarily is the logistics. So there's really 2 things to consider. How does it get started? And then how does it operate? So how it gets started, we have a 10-step launch process. We had to figure this out as we went over those years. But we learned that it's important you start by establishing community interest. And so we have basically a petitioning process, a signature campaign that you can find any school district in the country on our website. We say gather 50 signatures first. That's step 1, 50 signatures in your community of people who say, we want this in our community, because now you have the people that are going to be necessary through the rest of the process. So gather the signatures, hold a meeting, form a steering committee. Now you go into the planning phase. The steering committee meets with our team to put together a logistical plan. That plan is then presented to the school. So now we're in step 6, and we have a plan, we have signatures, we have a steering committee, we actually have a few dollars raised at that point, and we can make the case in a very compelling way to the school. This is going to be good for the school. 93% of the time, the school agrees. We then go into an implementation process where we identify a local director, a local leadership board, teachers, volunteers, that type of thing, and we execute a T-minus plan. And so even as I explain it, you can tell it is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of details. And so the value we bring is that we've templatized everything. Every email you need to send, every job you need to post, there's a template and customized for your local community. Once it's up and running, you have a director, you have teachers, you have a board, and you have volunteers, and students are released. Each student is able to be released once per week to receive a 1 hour Bible class.
That's amazing. So are you in high school as well? Or is
We
it
tend to start at
primarily?
we start at the elementary level, but then
Okay.
programs do tend to expand into the middle and then high school as they grow and mature.
But you like to start in the middle school level to begin.
At the elementary level, we
At
do.
the elementary level, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, for a few reasons. Yeah.
Okay. So how does somebody, I saw something on your website at least about sponsoring a kid,
Yeah.
and helping, and how can people listening help LifeWise? I mean, I'm no with all those moving parts. I mean, obviously I'm sure fundraising needed and all kinds of stuff,
Oh,
but
yeah.
give us a little bit of example of where we can help, how we can engage with it, and if somebody's interested, how to go about starting the process of just doing a little information digging.
Yeah, well, the process, I do think gathering more information is great, and our website's the best way to do that. And there are videos, there's FAQ, surely there's still people thinking this sounds bizarre and not real. And so I think, jumped on the website and see that it is real. It's happening in every context imaginable in the city, in the suburb, in the rural areas. We're going to be live next year in Los Angeles, California, and Washington State, and in Texas, in fact, and
That's great.
24 states. But get the information on the website, and then people can engage in a variety of ways. We often talk about three kinds of people: doers, connectors, and funders. And we need them all. And sometimes people can wear multiple of those hats. And so you can be the one to get it started in your community. So you can get to our website, you can find your local school district, sign your community interest list, share it, find 49 other people to sign, and begin the process of launching in your community. And so even as you're doing that, you're connecting, right? So that's another piece is that our greatest obstacle is people simply don't know this is possible. And so
Mm,
we say, hey, we need you to tell the story. We need you to spread the
mm,
word. Like our country needs this,
mm.
but still 95% of people just think Bible and school don't
Yeah.
mix. When in fact, no, we can reinstall the Bible for kids across the nation.
Hmm.
So connect others. And then, as you said, funding for sure. This entire thing is privately funded. It's entirely through donations. And so when there's a local program, the local community rallies behind it and people write checks, people sponsor students at
Mm.
$30 a month. And even if there's not the program in your community, you could sponsor you could jump online and sponsor a student wherever it's most needed.
That's so good. Just kind of some practical questions, just
Yeah.
about the scaling too, but like before that, do you always have to have an off-campus location? I mean,
Yes.
that's part of the Supreme Court ruling. So as part of the ramp up process and all that kind of 10 steps, would you guys walk people through like, looking at real estate, or leases or whatever and locations and, a little bit of a franchise stuff? I mean, it needs to have the
Mhm.
quality that you want. So do you guys help walk people through all that as well?
Everything you could possibly imagine. We have hundreds of pages of documents. And in fact, here's what would happen. If you're in community and you're going through the process, you'll be teamed up with a coach, and
Okay.
that coach is going to walk you through. And so you will begin to answer questions. If let's say you're on the steering committee, you get to that point, you get the signatures, now you have a steering committee answering questions about where might we hold this. And 85% of the time, maybe it's even higher now, that is a local church. And so there's usually a church within a mile. And so most of our programs bus. You can see
Okay.
the picture of a red
Mm.
bus. We have a fleet of now more than 100 red buses all over the country. But usually what happens, the local team will identify a nearby church. They'll purchase a used bus, which is much more affordable than I ever realized.
Oh yeah.
And you'll bus the kids to the nearby church, and then perhaps in the future, the long-term vision for that community will be to secure a piece of real estate adjacent to the
Okay.
school and
But
build
that's
something.
not a big barrier then, it sounds like. I mean, there's ways around that. Okay.
Oh yeah, there's all. I mean, it's a cliche, but where there's a will, there's a way has proven
Yeah,
to
for
be
sure.
the case over and over with this.
What impact have you seen it have on the kids? I mean,
Oh,
just does these stories just kind of pop in mind of,
oh, they flood in. They flood in the stories of kids who are being introduced to the
yeah,
Word of God. Many of them don't know the Bible has two testaments. They're
yeah,
saying the most amazing and innocent and I mean, for whatever reason, I love the story. The girl that came in and she was handed a Bible, and when she opened it, she looked up at the volunteer and she said, "The pages are so thin,"
yeah.
because
That's
she
awesome, man.
literally
Never opened it. Yeah,
never held a Bible in her hands. And so kids regularly getting connected to churches, reports of kids getting baptized, reports of families getting reconnected, reports of families getting baptized together. I mean, we get those stories weekly. Then we also have um, there was a third party study done that showed measurable outcomes that schools love. So when LifeWise is introduced, school attendance goes up, behavioral issues go down, in school and out of school suspensions go down. I mean, all the stuff you would expect from a powerful book, you know?
that's amazing, man. Okay, well, tell us about your book, and then just so I don't forget, Joel, your website is lifewise.org,
Correct. Yeah.
and that's where you can get all the information. We'll put a link on that on the show, and you can get it on Amazon and everywhere else. And it's called During School Hours. So,
Right.
so two things. You can get the book everywhere, but any information about LifeWise in the academy or getting it going in your hometown, or any questions at all, go to lifewise.org. Okay, now tell us about the book real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, the book, excited about how the book turned out. The subtitle is Why and How LifeWise Academy is Reinstalling Religious Education into the Public School Day. And it follows that format. You know, the first part is about why, you know, it tells the story of how the Bible was at the absolute center of our public school system and it has been removed. It talks about the detrimental effect that has had. It talks about the positive, the proven positive impact if we can find a way to reinstall Bible education for public school children. And so that's why it's so necessary. And then the second part is the how. And it really talks about this thing of release time religious instruction. Yes, it's a real thing. Here's the history. Here's how it's legal. And then here's the story of LifeWise and this tool that we have made that we want to offer to communities across the country to be able to make it happen in an efficient and make it happen soon. And so it's really an expounded version of the conversation we've had
Yeah,
today. But I would say this, I'm the worst book salesman ever because I tell people if you want to read a book and you want to go in depth, absolutely get the book. But I don't care if you get the book.
yeah,
And in fact, I'd say if you have to pick, get to our website and sign your
yeah,
name and get started launching
yeah.
a program in your community.
Okay. Joel, thanks for making time today. Man, I am pumped about what the Lord's doing through LifeWise and you and all your amazing team. So thank you for what you're doing. And hopefully we'll have some more Texas schools pop up and bring it down here. And if you're interested, anybody's listening, lifewise.org, check it out, sign up and let's get going. So thanks for making time today, Joel. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for giving me a chance to share my story.
You bet. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for joining us on this latest edition to the StoryField podcast. We hope that you have been challenged, inspired, and ready to take that next step, whatever that is. If you know someone with an amazing story that needs to be heard, send us an email at info@thestoryfield.com. Have a fantastic day, and we can't wait for you to join us on the next episode of The StoryField.